Welcome back to The Facts. We're having a conversation today with State Representative Isaac Latterell, who represents District 6 in the South Dakota House of Representatives. And we've been discussing the upcoming 2014 legislative session and talking about the issue of an amendment to the Constitution, to the U.S. Constitution, that would require a balanced federal budget. And Representative here, as we begin this segment, if the viewers were interested in finding out more information about what we've been talking about, do you have some contact information where people can reach out to you?
Sure. Actually, one of the main things that I'm working on is trying to identify supporters in different legislative districts across the state of South Dakota. So if the viewers want, I'm going to put up a special link just based on this program on my website. It's isaaclatterell.com. You can Google it or search it. But I'll have a place there you can find out information about this, and also just give me your email address. I really need to hear from you. I can, if you're a supporter of this idea, I want to answer your questions and let you know how you can get involved. So I would love to hear from them. isaaclatterell.com.
And then something that we didn't cover in the first segment are the committees that you serve on.
Right. I serve on the Local Government Committee and the Taxation Committee.
And as we look at the 2014 legislative session here, last segment you were talking about the effort that you're helping lead the charge on with some other legislators as well to amend the Constitution to pass a balanced budget amendment. And if we look at the number of states required for that effort, you had mentioned that 34 states were required.
Right.
As far as states that have passed this legislation or a resolution to call for this convention of the states, how many have passed that so far?
Well, there's been approximately 20 states that have already called for a convention to propose a balanced budget amendment. But there has been, throughout history, different times when states have called for an amending convention to restrain the federal government in some way. So currently there are already 20 who have passed this call for specifically the balanced budget amendment. So we've got support that's growing for both ideas, and I support both of them.
And then as states would look to make this call, does the legislative action take the form of a bill that's passed by the legislature and signed by the governor as law, or is it a resolution, or is there a third pathway?
Yeah, actually, it's just a resolution. The Constitution doesn't specify any role for the executive branch in this process. So really, it's just a resolution by the state legislature calling for a convention for proposing amendments. And once the required number of states have passed such a measure, Congress must set a time and date, and we'll have a convention. We will send delegates from South Dakota and the other states to discuss possible amendments or a balanced budget amendment. Each state will have an equal voice, an equal vote. So we will have the same amount of say in terms of what happens at this amending convention as would California. So we don't have to be worried about being overpowered by some states that have far left ideas that are not in step at all with South Dakota.
And then if you look at 34 states being needed to call the convention, how many states would be needed to pass any amendment to the Constitution?
Well, I believe it's 38 states, and it's 3/4 of the states are required to ratify any amendment that comes out. Now, the interesting thing is that a lot of these ideas that we've talked about when it comes to a convention of the states to propose amendments, a lot of these ideas are supported by just a vast majority of the American people. Things like term limits, things like balanced budget amendment, limitations on spending, limitations on taxes, and some ideas to limit the way that the Supreme Court has been tyrannical, and then just the regulation, onslaught that's coming out of D.C. Local farmers here, local businesses, Obamacare. These regulations are just crushing us locally. And people support being able to govern themselves locally. They want to make decisions locally. They want to be able to go say, Isaac, I don't like the way you voted on this thing, and really be able to make their voice heard. And they can't do that with all the power that's concentrated in D.C. right now.
And if you had to pick out, let's discuss some of the arguments against the convention. If you had to pick out one or two main arguments against the Convention of States, what are the concerns that you hear that are being raised?
Well, the biggest one that you hear is actually there are a group of people who are afraid that if we are to call a convention to propose amendments, that it would be a runaway convention, and this convention would entirely throw out the current Constitution. We could get something like a third world constitution just overnight, and I don't want to downplay or make light of those concerns, but I do want to address them, because the convention that we're calling for, as I mentioned earlier, is not a constitutional convention in the sense of rewriting the Constitution. It's actually specified in Article 5 of our current Constitution, and it says, upon application of 2/3 of the state legislatures, Congress shall call a convention for proposing amendments to this Constitution. So it's very clear, stated in there, that their power is limited to that, and when we send delegates to such a convention, we will be telling them exactly what subject matters they will be allowed to discuss. And whether it be a balanced budget amendment convention or an amendment which will restrain the size and the scope and the power of the federal government, those delegates are prohibited legally from voting on or taking part in any activities apart from the specific call that we've made when we call for the amending convention.
Another argument that some critics have made that passing a balanced budget amendment would be a problem would be in the case, let's take the example of World War II. There were substantial deficits that were run in the budget in order to fund the war effort, and I think you would have the vast, near unanimous majority in the country today say that was definitely worth taking to help win World War II and create peace around the world after great global conflict. If a balanced budget amendment was passed, could that cause some problems for funding future war efforts?
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned the war efforts, and in the past several decades or years, there have been different military operations by the United States that have caused a lot of controversy, because when we as a country go to war, we want to make sure that we are actually standing up for a very clear principle of right and wrong, that we are defending, freedom and liberty. And a lot of times people are starting to become concerned that the efforts that we're doing have political nature to them, making the administration look good, etc. So that's just one caveat. But I think that there will always be ways, if the American people feel overwhelmingly that we need to defend ourselves, the people are going to provide that mechanism in order to do that. But it's important that we are cautious when we're going to war. Nobody wants to go to war. We should only do that as a last resort to protect the American people. But you bring up a good point, because the people are concerned about the spending of the federal government. They're concerned about, are we going to have the funds to do what we need to do? So actually limiting the scope of the federal government will be a positive thing, because then the resources needed to do things like protect our country will be there, instead of being spent on frivolous things like, researching shrimp swimming underwater, etc.
Well, Representative, thanks for that explanation. And when we return back after the break, we'll continue to discuss some of the arguments for and against a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and also discuss some upcoming issues during the 2014 legislative session that will be taking place in addition to the discussion here today. Stick around. We'll be back with more of the facts.
Whether you're looking for extra money or contemplating that next purchase, check out Sunset Pawn, 2.5 blocks east of Kiwanis on 12th Street. Find plenty of air compressors, 1,000 to 10,000 watt electrical generators, jigsaws, bandsaws, as well as many name brand tools. Great outdoors items with lots of choices for the fishermen. They take cash loans on almost anything of value, and they buy, sell, and trade. Sunset Pawn, 2407 West 12th Street, Sioux Falls, making life affordable.
Need to sell your boat, car, furniture, or advertise a garage sale? Advertise for free with our new classifieds online. Go to the Sioux Falls Shopping News website, post a job, enter our monthly contests, shop for coupons, and much more. Log on to sfshoppingnews.com, select the Classified tab, and click Submit Free Online Classified Ad. You can even upload 5 pictures to sell it fast. The Sioux Falls Shopping News Online, connecting buyers and sellers every day.